I'm sure people ask you about RFK now because he's in the news.
Right.
And, he sat here. We're friends. I love him. Do people ask you about him?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I don't know. No, I kind of feel the same way that you do. Like, I've spent number of occasions hanging with him just in a strictly, family dinner kind of vibe, and I really got along with him well.
He's great.
I think he's great. I think he's funny.
He's wonderful.
I like him.
Yes.
I love him. I think he's...
he's not crazy. I mean, the people trying to... He's also got, like, I said to him when he was here, I don't agree with everything you said, and I don't think your father would either, but your father would be so proud that you stuck to your guns, like more than anybody.
Yeah, that's a bad thing in this context, fellas.
And when you jump on the bandwagon with who is the most divisive president ever, it makes sense that you're going to be made to look terrible. And so I don't know what to believe, because it's not like I sit with Bobby and I go, so hey, let's talk about this. It's like we're just playing cards or playing Mafia or having fun or having dinner. I'm not going to pick his brain to find out exactly which of those things are true. I just kind of assume that none of them are. There's certain things that he oversees that seem to be supported in a bipartisan way, like getting terrible toxic stuff out of our kids' food. I think that's a great thing. And so if you do that, that's amazing. I'd hate to be so mired in hatred for the president that any success from his administration is something I'd have an allergic reaction to. To be like, oh, well, if they do it, I don't want it to happen. I'll put Clorox in my children's cereal myself. It's like, come on, be reasonable here.
The only person being unreasonable in their framing, by the way, is you, Chris Pratt. It's you. On this line of, oh, well, he's working for Trump, so they want him to fail. No, dude. Wrong. Completely wrong.
He's funny. He's wonderful. I love him, says Chris Pratt about RFK Jr., a man who is quite literally ending cancer research and hurting and killing people. He continued on to explain that the reason that RFK is as hated as he is due to his association with the burnt sienna blobfish that's currently inhabiting the Oval Office. Chris Pratt can get, and I can't emphasize this enough, let me learn you something, Chris. The reason that we hate that miserable, roided-out, cricket-throated sack of doesn't have diddly do with Donald Trump. We hate him because he stands for pseudoscientific bullshit and pushes it into legislation, which will directly hurt and kill people. We hate him because he spits in the face of science at every turn, despite the fact that most of his education comes in how to serve roadkill a la carte and where to stick the needle for steroids so that it doesn't leave a mark. The fact that he threw in with that malodorous McDonald's masticating monster doesn't prove shit other than the fact that he's got no morals, and apparently the brainworm ate his spine too, because last time I checked, before the election, he was a big-time anti-Trumper. You RFK Jr. and you Chris Pratt.
The energy we needed today came from It's Luke 7 on TikTok, who you should be following. For a different approach in tone, but resulting anger nonetheless.
I don't like RFK Jr. because he said that unvaccinated people have less freedoms than Anne Frank did. I like him because he created a made-up link between antidepressants and school shootings, when in reality there's data around those people, right? And most of them were not on medication. I don't like RFK Jr. because he's not too sure about the idea of germs. Like he's not too sure that HIV causes AIDS. Because AIDS in his eyes can be caused in part by heavy recreational drug use in gay men and drug addicts. No science there, just vibes. This is a man who advocates for drinking raw milk. There's no benefits to drinking raw milk except the government tells you not to, so you can be a hard and get bovine tuberculosis and bird flu, or give it to your small children so they get tuberculosis. The year is 2025. You are not Doc Holliday. You should not be dying from tuberculosis like people are in the Midwest. I don't like him because he dismantled the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee all at once with absolutely no plan. He attacks the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. They're trusting these decisions to a man who says that a parasite ate part of his brain. And now measles cases are exploding in the US, and so is pertussis. 266 children have died this flu season, with 90% of them not being vaccinated. This is a record since they started reporting it in 2004.
Real.takes on the same platform brings the heat as well.
RFK is busy going after fluoride in drinking water so that in poor communities, people's teeth rot out of their heads. And when we're talking about water, he thinks that it's making the kids have sexual dysphoria. Is this based on science? No. Once again, just vibes. Just like all his theories about 5G and Wi-Fi. Just like his theory that Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people were spared from COVID because of how it was designed. A man, by the way, that thinks black people don't need vaccines on the same schedule as white people because they have tougher immune systems. Now, does this man understand that black people don't all actually have the same genetic makeup and come from all different parts of the world? I don't think so.
A very good video all around. Let's also not forget a previous piece I did on RFK Jr.
This is an individual tragedy as well. Autism destroys families. And more importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. These are children who should not be suffering like this. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes, they'll never hold a job, they'll never play baseball, they'll never write a poem, they'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
The Secretary of Health and Human Services just ran off another never list. It triggered me in ways I can't even describe. And now 24 years later, RJ is 27 now, and he has actually checked off and shattered most of those nevers off of that list. So when I hear someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. say and describe our children as family destroyers, I felt the weight of every parent who's ever had to fight 3 times, 4 times as hard just to prove their child's worth. And it just plays into every stereotype and stigma that every person with autism has ever had to fight to overcome. And as an advocate, I've had to fight against as well, and a mom. Because what he's peddling here is not just ignorance, it is institutionalized hopelessness. If anything, I think my son didn't rob me of having a normal child. He gave me a new lens of what it means to love unconditionally. Of course, there are different amounts of support that people on the autism spectrum are going to need with different tasks in life. And, you know, they're going to have different levels of needs. But these are things that they can overcome. And any official that's tasked with leading this nation's health policies, they should be celebrating the resilience of families that have overcome things, not dismissing them and giving us another never day.
Because what it shows is the cruelty of Bobby Kennedy. Speaking of.
In late 2019, though, the country was in a public health crisis. Not from a new threat like COVID, but from a very old killer of kids that had once been nearly eradicated, measles. By December, almost 4,000 cases had been reported in a country of 200,000, roughly the same population as Des Moines, Iowa. And 55 people, mostly children under the age of 4, had died. The tiny nation imposed a 2-day national lockdown. Citizens were stuck in their homes to stop the spread. Government volunteers fanned out to help families in need. An international health effort was underway. The Samoan government even asked the US CDC for help. By the time the Samoan government declared an end to the epidemic, 83 people had died. Again, most of them kids. Now remember, we're talking about measles here, a disease that was almost eliminated worldwide thanks to safe, effective and cheap vaccine. No, that was down to 67%. And in the 1-year period from 2017 to 2018, it dropped down to about 40%. What happened to send the rate so low in 2018 specifically? Well, a growing anti-vaccine movement found a story to rally around. But those facts did not matter to Samoan anti-vaxxers. Instead of telling the truth, they claimed that the vaccine itself was responsible for the deaths. And they got help from a US-based anti-vax group, Children's Health Defense, which took to Facebook to question the safety of the vaccines that those infants received. The founder of Children's Health Defense, a prominent American anti-vax activist, would later tell a Samoan newspaper that he had the Prime Minister's ear on the issue. and that the island nation's leader had privately shared his doubts about the safety of immunizing the public. That activist, quote unquote, had become something of a celebrity in Samoa. He was honored as a guest of the prime minister. He met with local anti-vax activists. Who was this American anti-vaxxer who bragged after the epidemic about his sway with the Samoan leader? Actually, he's the reason why I'm telling you all this.
When I am the President of the United States, I am going to end the chronic disease epidemic in this country.
RFK Jr., who heads the anti-vax Children's Health Defense Network, which has since been banned from Facebook and Instagram for spreading misinformation. RFK Jr., who in June 2019, along with his wife, actress Cheryl Hines, was a special guest of the Samoan Prime Minister at the country's Independence Day celebration. While on that trip, Kennedy also just happened to meet with one of Samoa's most prominent anti-vaxxers, and she posted a pic of them together on Instagram, along with the hashtag #InvestigateBeforeYouVaccinate. And as more children died that November, Kennedy sent the Samoan Prime Minister a letter pressing him to investigate whether those children died not of measles, but ridiculously of exposure to the measles vaccine. Remember, Kennedy is an environmental lawyer with zero qualifications to talk about vaccines or healthcare of any kind.
And let's not forget his love life. In a book titled Ask Not, The Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed, by author Maureen Callahan, one excerpt would read as follows. Okay, here we go. Bobby was never around, ever. He didn't have a job that required travel, yet he traveled all the time. When he did swoop in, he'd take one or all the children on some adventure and leave Mary behind. She had become persona non grata, despite hosting all the dinner parties, the 4th of July barbecues, the celebrity-studded fundraisers, despite raising their children. Another in the book would read as follows. Mary Richardson Kennedy, RFK's wife, had been seeing a therapist, sometimes alone, sometimes with RFK. Her name was Sheena Hankin, and she specialized in high-profile clients. When RFK asked for Mary to be diagnosed as mentally ill, the therapist would refuse. Quote, "Your wife is not mentally ill," she would inform Bobby. "She's angry and depressed, but she's not ill." Cheryl Hines would enter the picture. Mary would be cut off completely by Bobby Kennedy, according to the reporting. Her credit card and court-approved $20,000 a month living expenses gone because of RFK Jr. And she would ask other moms at school for money. Everyone knew that she was broke. Completely broke. And then she hung herself. Just 2 days after her death, RFK Jr. and his sister Carrie ran to the New York Times and told the outlet Mary was an alcoholic. Sometimes she would even pass out in her food, they would claim, and he, Bobby, would play the victim to the press. Now, if you thought that was bad, this then transpired. Just a week after Mary's funeral, in the middle of the night, without telling Mary's siblings or obtaining the required legal permitting, Bobby Jr. had Mary Kennedy's coffin dug up from the ground in the Kennedy family plot, and it would be moved some 700 feet away. When the press found out and they asked RFK why, a family spokesperson said RFK failed to realize how crowded the Kennedy plot was. Mary was left to face traffic, they would say. No headstone marking her grave. She was buried alone. Further reporting on RFK's infidelities via the Daily Beast was that the number of times that he cheated was 37. And that is per his own diary. Mary Kennedy labeled RFK, and I quote, a sexual deviant. She also said that he abused prescription medicine. They printed in the back of a nearly 400-page red notebook, RFK listed 37 women, and he used a scale of 1 to 10, noting which sex acts they had done. 16 of the women were 10s. On one day, he recorded a triple play, meaning 3 separate encounters listed as a 10, 3, and 2. That is Caroline Kennedy, RFK's first cousin, who spoke out against his nomination by Donald Trump.
Throughout the past year, people have asked for my thoughts about my cousin Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his presidential campaign. Overseeing the FDA, the NIH, the CDC, and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, agencies that are charged with protecting the most vulnerable among us, is an enormous responsibility and one that Bobby is unqualified to fill. He lacks any relevant government, financial, management, or medical experience. His views on vaccines are dangerous and willfully misinformed. I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator. I watch his younger brothers and cousins follow him down the path of drug addiction. His basement, his garage, his dorm room were always the center of the action, where drugs were available, and he enjoyed showing off how he put baby chickens and mice in a blender to feed to his hawks. It was often a perverse scene of despair and violence. But siblings and cousins who Bobby encouraged down the path of substance abuse suffered addiction, illness, and death, while Bobby has gone on to misrepresent, lie, and cheat his way through life. Bobby is addicted to attention and power. Bobby preys on the desperation of parents of sick children, vaccinating his own kids while building a following hypocritically discouraging other parents from vaccinating theirs. His constant denigration of our healthcare system and the conspiratorial half-truths he's told about vaccines, including in connection with Samoa's deadly 2019 outbreak of measles. In other words, Bobby is willing to profit and enrich himself by denying access to a vaccine that can prevent almost all forms of cervical cancer and has already been safely administered to millions of boys and girls. It also wasn't easy to remain silent last year when Bobby expropriated my father's image and distorted President Kennedy's legacy to advance his own failed presidential campaign, and then groveled to Donald Trump for a job. Bobby continues to grandstand off my father's assassination and that of his own father. It's incomprehensible to me that someone who is willing to exploit their own painful family tragedies for publicity would be put in charge of America's life and death situations.
Hey, I appreciate you watching. Now, if you can, please do become a channel member by going to youtube.com/tytsports and clicking the join button. If that's too much for you, you can just go to tyt.com/join to become a member. It helps all of us out here at the Young Turks and keeps our network afloat. In addition, you could follow me on my socials on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Appreciate the love. Have a great day.